To me, ice climbing is just sort of the most engaging thing that you can do. Like when I'm ice climbing, it's pretty much the only thing that I feel like takes all 100% of my focus. So it's one of the few things that my mind doesn't wander to other things while I'm doing. You're kind of constantly thinking about the temperature and the sound of the swing and the feel of the swing and where you're going and what the avalanche danger is. There's something, kind of always something to keep you mentally in the moment while you're ice climbing. For me, large objectives are really what's incredibly motivating. I basically try to sort of dream up these climbs that are very much at the limit, or things that I don't really perceive to be possible for me at the time. I've always been pretty motivated by trying to climb new routes or previously unclimbed faces, or climbing in a style, maybe a lighter, faster style than what's been climbed before. I've been fortunate enough between my guiding and personal climbing to have gone on over 30 expeditions around the world, and to lots of different waterfall ice climbing venues through the Canadian Rockies and the lower 48 states here in the US. It's really sort of defined who I am, and a lot of the trajectory of my life in the last 20 years has been as a result of ice climbing. It's allowed me to sort of climb these faces that initially just seemed completely impossible, and has allowed me to feel comfortable in places that humans are just not designed to go to. And yeah, ice climbing has helped form a lot of friendships. A lot of the close relationships that I have with people are as a result of climbing ice together and kind of getting through these big alpine expeditions together. It's also allowed me to work really closely with some clients through my guiding to help them progress in these skill sets, and I have incredible enthusiasm about ice climbing and really enjoy watching people progress in that. I think of mixed climbing as requiring this large pool of skills, and it's kind of the combination of all the things, of the rock climbing skill set and the ice climbing skill set, and kind of managing them in the environment. And I think of every rope length in mixed climbing as kind of a microcosm of these bigger alpine routes that I'm going to climb. And I think it's one of the best ways that I've found in order to train for climbing and on big cold alpine faces is through a large bulk of mixed climbing in the winter. I live in Salt Lake City, Utah, and the same reason that our mountains here, the Wasatch Range, the same reason that it'll never be a destination that people travel halfway across the world to come to ice climb, is the same reason that I love the ice climbing here. A lot of our ice sits right on the rain-snow line, and as that freezing level rises, it rains, and a lot of our ice falls down, but then it rebuilds again. So we're kind of constantly in this flux state of ice growing and falling down and rebuilding again. So the conditions are kind of very dynamic here. It's a great place for mixed climbing because a lot of times our ice pillars don't touch the ground. Very exciting place to climb, and you kind of constantly have to be thinking and assessing the stability of the ice that you're on. I've been married for 10 years, and between my guiding and my personal climbing, I'm gone a lot of the time. And how do I balance those things? And the answer is sometimes I do a better job balancing it than others. And I'm usually gone at least half the year. I married a woman that's an incredibly supportive partner. I tell people that she's as supportive as possible while still having a backbone. And she tells me when I'm messing up. I think my life is much better being married and being in a healthy relationship than if I probably wouldn't still be alive if I were single. What's one of the funnier things that's happened on a climbing route? And this last spring, my friend Jackson and I, we climbed a few large routes in Alaska, but we did a single push on the infinite spur of Mount Foraker. And we did this in 65 hours from the base camp to the base camp again. So we walked for about 10 hours, slept for 1 hour, climbed for 25 hours, slept for a couple of hours, walked for another 10 hours or so, and then we got into one tricky part of the descent ridge, and we're both like kind of hallucinating at this point, like hearing voices that aren't there. We're seeing the snow like rising and falling like water in front of us. We saw some people out skiing, and I kind of asked Jackson for validation that they were like real and not just part of my imagination. And eventually on this ridge, we kind of didn't quite know where we were going. It was like the 1 hour of the night that was dark at that time of year, and we got kind of overtaken by a cloud, and we both got pretty cold, so we decided we'd set up our tent. We had a little tiny like 1 pound tent, and we set that up and just kind of sat in there for a little bit, and my back was to the door of the tent and Jackson was facing the other direction, and we're camped inside this little crevasse, and I unzipped the tent behind me and I'm like, hey Jackson, look out there and let me know if it's clear or not. And he looks outside, he's like, no man, it's totally white, I can't see anything. And I'm like, okay, so I zipped the tent shut without checking myself. And about 15 minutes later, I like unzip the tent and I look outside and I'm like, oh, we gotta, it's clear out, we gotta go. And eventually, we walked for quite a while longer and got into base camp. And the next day, Jackson admitted to me sheepishly that when I asked him if it was clear outside, that he was actually just staring right into the wall of the crevasse and not actually looking out at the sky. I think about risk in the mountains largely on a scale of likelihood and consequence, and I think the sort of more likely I am to take a fall, or the more likely a negative situation is to occur, that consequence needs to be quite low. And if the consequence of a mistake is very high, then I need to make sure that I'm in an area where it's very unlikely to happen. Risk in the mountains is a tricky thing to talk about and a hard thing to quantify, but I think trying to look at it as objectively as possible, and sort of the bigger, crazier thing that you're trying to do, those conditions need to be as close to perfect as possible. I think on days where you're just going out to ski or going to the local cliff, the conditions can kind of be whatever they are, but if you're pushing yourself out there at the very limit of what you feel like is capable, you need to wait maybe 10 years for that condition to align for you to climb that mountain. What is the scariest moment that I've had in the mountains, and how did I overcome it? And this probably happened in the spring of 2019. I was in the Alaska Range. We had a really successful trip so far, climbing some new routes in the Ruth Gorge of Alaska, and we decided to kind of go up and climb one more route. And we were on an unclimbed portion of the east face of Mount Bradley, and we were about 3,000 vertical feet up the route when a piece of ice fell, a pretty small piece of ice about the size of a fist, and it skimmed the brim of my helmet and broke my nose and went into my left eye. And immediately all vision, 100% of my vision, even light detection in my left eye was gone. We kind of took a few minutes to sort of assess what was going on, and quickly realized that I was getting a lot of pressure in my head and getting nauseous and dizzy, and we needed to descend right away. And we descended down, rappelling down this face, and got back onto the lower glacier, and a ski plane came and picked us up. Once the dust settled from that, I needed a pretty major surgery on my eye, and doctors told me if someday with assistance I might be able to climb again. But I remember after that doctor's appointment, I kind of got back home and was feeling pretty down, and decided I'd go for a run, and went for a run, and I was like, oh, well, running doesn't feel so bad. I'll get onto a trail. I ran on a trail for a bit. That didn't feel so bad. I was like, oh, hey, this big easy rock climbing face is pretty close by, and I ended up soloing a 1,500 foot pretty easy rock face that afternoon, and went to the climbing gym and climbed 512 that evening, and kind of just started to be like, okay, we're gonna figure this out. This isn't maybe quite as dire as they think it is. And 4 weeks after my surgery, I was back guiding large technical routes in the Alps in France and Switzerland. And 6 months after my injury, I returned to Nepal and climbed a large unclimbed west face there, the west face of Tengi Ragi Tau, with a good friend of mine, Tino Villanueva, and we were awarded a PLA d'Or in 2020 for that ascent. So how I kind of overcame this scary moment from wondering if my life would sort of ever be the same again was just the same way I try and approach any obstacle in life, is breaking it down objectively and thinking about what needs to happen one step at a time, and building upon that until you're where you need to be.